To World Poetry Day. Hey, Claudia. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to have you here. Good afternoon. It is another spectacular afternoon here. Um, Hi, Deborah from Guelph. Um, Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to have you here. So, I'll wait. Actually, we'll do intros for a couple of minutes because I am actually um, I am actually going to read some poetry. Bonjour. Um, but obviously, I don't want to, mid-sentence do that. I do want to do a quick do a quick check. I'll tell you about the pipe in a minute, time. Do a quick check. It is not hash. Quick check here. Is everyone hearing me just fine? Um, yeah, I put in my headphones. I was waffling, but it's probably on the yard here. Now it's officially outside about 5 or 6 degrees, but it's probably 15 or 20 in the sun. So, I mean, in case, of course I'm a granddad. If you want to, probably be seen if you want to see a real fashion show. So this cardigan, if we talk about a literary tradition, is from the Aran Islands, from the island of Inisheer. When I was 21 years old, I spent several months on that island, and I wrote the whole time I was there. And none of it was ever published because it was utter crap. Um, this pipe. Now, you probably gather I'm very, very anti-tobacco and anti anything that's inhaled. We too, Melissa. But this was my grandfather's pipe. So it sits up on the mantle in the house. And every now and then, if I'm feeling pensive, my grandfather was a journalist. This is my Canadian grandfather. So he was a journalist. But this is what springtime Alberta, uh, this is where, see that? See that? Are you ready for the socks, everyone? And there. So, so this is okay, Robert. So this is fashion out here, and I was gonna go up on the hill. There is water dripping, Casey, and that's why I was waffling on whether I put in the headphones or not. But I actually sort of like the sound of it, Casey. Very honestly, does the water dripping bother you, or is it kind of nice? You're not freezing. You're really not freezing, and let me show you. This is our back now. So I've just turned over the my table. Okay, Casey. Um, well, that's no, but it's good to know because I can try to turn it over. See, I've been chipping ice on the deck. This is what happens, Highland. But just have a look at our afternoon. This is what we've been. Now, this is warmer than we should be for this time of year. Look at the light back here, ladies and gentlemen. And I didn't see what Marlene said. Okay. But look at Mount Bourgeot out in the distance. Um, have a look at that. Well, yeah, so there's Mount Bourgeot in the distance, everyone. So it is just spectacular. But this is a phone call. I should be on Do Not Disturb, but so it is a spectacular day. And the kid is home, and of course, the kid is doing a cooking thing later on today. But I wanted to do you can have a grilled dinner. Sound was gone. I think everyone else is hearing me now because I want to get going on our poetry readings. Okay. So it is World Poetry Day. It's been officially World Poetry Day since 1999. They've moved the date around a few times, but really why it's World Poetry Day is the idea of supporting poetry is one of those rare arts which doesn't translate particularly well. Um, um, but first of all, well, absolutely, Melissa. So first of all, I just want to say Oki and hello from Treaty 7 territory. I'm here in Banff, of course, which is home. I'm sitting on my deck in my backyard. And as obviously I'm Canadian and I am a writer, I'm not a poet. I've written, I went through a phase, I think as many of us do, where I wrote a lot of really bad poetry. I'll never be as bad a poet as, say, Jim Morrison was, for example, but I'll never be as good a poet as many I've seen. But yes, I'm sitting back here, and so in the time that we have, um, Oh, the music's not bad. Hi, Sayuri. Um, but I've picked a selection of poems. So of course I feel as though just because I've shared it before, pre World Poetry Day here, I felt as though I need to read one Robert Service poem, but I can assure you two of the poems are going to be on the controversial side because, we've got to do that. So there were many more people signed up, but that's quite all right. I think we'll probably get going. And why don't we start? So I say, this is my grandfather's pipe. He actually owned a newspaper out on Vancouver Island for a period of time. I like to support, of course, the written arts. I've published a few books in my life, and I like it, and I'm even drinking green tea as one does. But I'm going to start with a very positive. You know what I'm going to have to do, everyone? As I have to take off my Irish cardigan. You know that Ireland is the second most literate country in the world? Does anyone know? Thanks, Harry. Does anyone know what the most literate country in the world is in terms of number of published authors to population? Just out of interest. Ireland's number 2, not Argentina. Nope. No. No, not the UK. Nope. Not Scotland. Amsterdam's not a country, Robert, but not the Netherlands. No. No. Finland would be a good guess. No, it is actually Iceland. Icelanders, and again, Iceland throws off all world statistics because they're such a tiny population. They're extremely literate people. I remember at one point when I first started guiding tours there, they said that one in that's right, Natalie. 1 in 3 people had published a book at some point. So I mean, it's not, but it's a bit like me. I write a lot, as many of you know, but I'm done with publishing because there's just not that much money in it. But today I was going back and forth with this National Geographic interview that I've done with the UK. But I'm going to start out with a very, very unreasonably positive poem. I've just picked Canadian poetry because I'm in my corner. But Shane Kozan, some Canadians might be interested in his name. Yeah, he's from the Northwest Territories, and he's written a lot. He was a gentleman who was extremely bullied growing up, but way back in 2010, he was asked to read a poem at the opening ceremonies of the Vancouver Olympics, and it was obviously an Olympic thing. It was the Olympics coming to Vancouver, so a bit of a rah experience. But let me read it to you. And it's a poem that makes you feel very good about this country. I would take my hat off for you, but it's just so bright out here. And the poem is called Define Canada. And here we go. You might say the home of the rocket or the great one who inspired number 9s and little number 99s. But we're more than just hockey and fishing lines off the rocky coast of the Maritimes. And some say what defines us is something as simple as please and thank you. And as for your welcome, well, we say that too. But we are far more than genteel or civilized. We are an idea in the process of being realized. We are young, we are cultures strung together, then woven into a tapestry. And the design is what makes us more than the sum total of our history. We are an experiment going right for a change, with influences that range from A to Z, and yes, we say Z instead of Z, with all the brightness of Chinatown and the laughter of Little Italy. We dream so big that there are those who would call our ambition an industry. We reforest what we clear because we believe in generations beyond our own, knowing now that so many of us have grown past what we used to be. We can stand here today filled with all the hope of people have when they say things like someday, because we are more than just a laundry list of things to do and places to see, more than hills to ski or countryside ponds to skate. We are the abandoned hesitation of all those who can't wait. We are first-rate greasy spoon diners and healthy living cafes, a country that is all the ways you choose to live, a nation that can give you variety because we are choices. We are millions upon millions of voices shouting, keep exploring. We are more. We are the surprise the world has in store for you. It's true, Canada is the what in what's new. So don't let your luggage define your travels. Each light unravels differently, and experiences are what make up the colors of our tapestry. We are the true north, strong and free, and what's more, it's that we didn't just say it, we made it be. So, Yeah, it's actually the one line of that poem I don't like is the Z instead of Z, because it just seems like a bit of pointing a finger specifically at our southern neighbors, and you hear people say Z. I see that. It's a lovely poem. It was a beautiful poem, and I say I have a lot of time for Shane himself as a poet, because he tackles heavier subjects, but he was doing that. Um, it's Define Canada, Robert, and you can find it. You can actually, if you want to watch it online, literally watch a clip from the opening ceremonies of the Olympics, and he stood there right in the middle. When we talk about poets and the poetic tradition in this country, of course, at the opening ceremonies of those Vancouver Olympics, uh, Leonard Cohen's song "Hallelujah" um, was sung by Katie Lang, who's from here in Alberta, and of course, to me, he's the poetry I grew up on. But I wanted to give you a mix of things, and I think I'll go slightly, starting with that raw set of poem. Let's go into a little bit of chronological order. Now, I'm going to read one. I mean, I have a million of these, and any good Canadian parent raises their child on Robert Service. And as many of you know, I've spent a huge amount of time in the North. I've actually, well, I'm waffling now. You're all familiar with the cremation of Sam McGee, are you not? It would be fair to say most people are familiar with that fabulous poem. Um, yeah, for their strange things done in the midnight sun. Why don't I read a different one then? But well, KM, the cremation of Sam McGee is probably the most famous of these poems. I don't know where you live in the world. So Robert Service himself was in Preston, from Preston, England. Went to the north, and sort of went for the gold rush, but worked in a bank. And then he really became the bard of the Yukon. So there are two famous writers that went for the Yukon gold rush. One was Robert Service, and the other was Jack London. Jack London left San Francisco, went up north, lasted less than a year, got scurvy, and wrote 120 stories about it. So the Call of the Wild. Why don't we do this? So the the cremation of Sam McGee is kind of a funny one. It's about the cold. But why I thought it might be fun to read you another one is because Gold Rush defines, I do too, Henry, defines so much of the Americas. And I do talk about this. I did a raw history about this as well. But of course, the Americas today, if you're not, sorry, I'm going to sneeze because the sun, I apologize, everyone. At least I didn't spray it all over the screen. But the every one of us who is not of indigenous origin here in this part of the world means we are probably the byproduct of someone. Thank you for blessing me. For we're probably the byproduct of someone or some group that we're trying to extract wealth. Right, the gold rush and finding gold. Of course, the Spanish went after El Dorado, the city of gold, and they found it. It's Potosi in Bolivia, as some of you may know. And they found that, and they of course really led to the creation of chattel slavery, the MITA, the indentured servitude of indigenous peoples. They extracted so much wealth that it then created, of course, the city of Seville. It created do you sire? Yep. And well, in Brazil they were going after rubber, right? Wherever the thing was, and you watch these migrations of people up to the Americas, and of course, 1849. The gold rush in California is directly related to the Great Hunger in Ireland, 1847. People escaped from Ireland, obviously, from desperate hunger. They moved over, found gold, but really less than 1% ever get rich from that. But they create the first multicultural city in North America, San Francisco. And then they move north in 1860. 1858, they find gold in the Fraser River. That leads to the creation of British Columbia, which then creates the formation of Canada, the Barkerville Gold Rush. And then, of course, 1898, they find the gold way up in the north. So all this land, even where I live here, and you don't need to be looking at me the whole time. You can look at the lovely view of the mountains in the background here and my barbecue. But all that sense of the great Arctic North is such a different world, and it was always sort of desperate. So the poem I'm going to read to you here is another one. And again, if we have time at the end, I'm happy to do the cremation of Sam McGee. It's just I've read that so many times. But this one is called "The Spell of the Yukon," and this gives you a sense of what that utter desperation is, but also the great sort of strength of people. So I wanted the gold and I got it. I scrambled and I mucked like a slave. Was it famine or scurvy? I fought it. I hurled my youth into a grave. I wanted the gold and I got it. Came out with a fortune last fall. Yet somehow life's not what I thought it. And somehow the gold isn't all. No, there's the land. Have you seen it? It's the cussedest land that I know. From the big, dizzy mountains that screen it to the deep, death-like valleys below. Some say God was tired when he made it. Some say it's a fine land to shun. Maybe, but there's some as would trade it for no land on earth, and I'm one. You come to get rich. Damn good reason. You feel like an exile at first. You hate it like hell for a season. Then you are worse than the worst. It grips you like some kind of sinning. It twists you from foe to a friend. It seems it's been since the beginning. It seems it will be till the end. I've stood on some mighty mouthed hollow that's plumb full of hush to the brim. I've watched the big husky sun wallow in crimson and gold and grow dim, till the moon set the pearly peaks gleaming, and the stars tumbled out neck and crop, and I've thought that I surely was dreaming, with the peace of the world piled on top. The summer, no sweeter was ever, the sunshiny woods all athrill, the grayling aleap in the river, the big horn asleep on the hill. The strong life that never knows harness, the wilds where the caribou call, the freshness, the freedom, the fairness. Oh God, how I'm stuck on it all. The winter, the brightness that blinds you, the white land locked tight as a drum, the cold fear that follows and finds you, the silence that bludgeons you dumb. The snows that are older than history, the woods where the weird shallows slant, the stillness, the moonlight, the mystery. I've bade 'em goodbye, but I can't. There's a land where the mountains are nameless, and the rivers all run God knows where. There are lives that are erring and aimless, and death that just hangs by a hair. There are hardships that nobody reckons. There are valleys unpeopled and still. There's a land, oh, it beckons and beckons, and I want to go back, and I will. They're making my money diminish. I'm sick of the taste of champagne. Thank God when I'm skinned to a finish, I'll pike to the Yukon again. I'll fight, and I bet it's no shan fight. It's hell, and I've been there before. And it's better than this by a damn sight. So for me, the Yukon once more. There's gold, and it's haunting and haunting. It's luring me on as of old. Yet it isn't the gold that I'm wanting so much as just finding the gold. It's the great big broad land way up yonder. It's the forest where silence is lease. It's the beauty that fills me with wonder. It's the stillness that fills me with peace. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the spell of the Yukon. Um, we talk about being kissed, you know, um, and I was. It was just, we all have our own little stories, but I found so much poetry and literature up there. So I began guiding in '96 in Europe, and I was very, very young to be doing it. And in 1999, I think I got a contract to go up and run tours in Alaska and Yukon. And I spent, you're welcome, Chloe. And I spent, well, 2 seasons up there. And I've been back many times, but I would be up there. I wouldn't see night for months. But of course, this was before. I mean, before there was no internet, or barely. And so I would find these poems and read them on the buses and all of that. But when you get bitten by the North, um, it's amazing. Very high levels of education up there. So it's very meaningful. And I'm happy to read another one if we have time towards the end here. But I have two more. Two more that I really want to talk about. Actually, there's a third one I was going to read to you. I saw it on a comedy show once where some fellow went into an open mic poetry reading, and he stood up, said, "Oh, I'm a little bit nervous," and everyone's really encouraging. He said, "I call my poem 1,000,000." And he sat there and went, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I think he got to about 246 before they all started applauding. So at some point, I want to come and read you 1,000,000. um, all right. once again, obviously, this is a Canadiana Poetry Afternoon. Um, so, if we all want to be a little kind of, for those of you joining in, we've already had two poems. So I'm sorry that you're late. I'm sitting out on my back deck, and it's winter. It was -12 this morning, but I'm here with my grandfather's pipe, who was actually a writer. Well, I guess I'm a writer too, but he was a journalist. Um, and that's as close as I ever get to tobacco. But it's a lovely old pipe, isn't it? But it's as close as I'll ever actually get to tobacco. Um, it's a beautiful pipe, isn't it? I had one more, but it broke on one of the moves, unfortunately. All right, for you Canadians on board. So if you're in this country, hi Joe. If you're in this country on November 11th, we have the Remembrance Day ceremonies. I do go. With all the reservations that I would have as a pacifist, as a humanist, as someone deeply, deeply troubled by particularly World War I. But in this country, whenever we have Remembrance Day, and we all know this, there is one poem, I could just about do it without looking at it, but there's one poem that's always read. This poem was written during World War I by Canadian physician Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae. I've been to where he fell in Flanders, which obviously is in Belgium near Ypres. He was inspired to write this on May 13th, 1915, after presiding over the funeral of a friend and a fellow soldier who died. And of course, we talk about poppies, indeed. So it's a very, very short poem. It's just 3 little stanzas, but I would like to talk about it afterwards. I wish we could be talking together, but this is what's read at every Remembrance Day in this country. So, in Flanders fields, the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up your quarrel with the foe. To you, from failing hands we throw the torch, be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. So, I grew up, every Canadian does it, Karen. Well, every Canadian grows up listening to that poem in school and so forth. Now, if I were to pick a poem about World War One, I would pick The Green Fields of France, um, which is now done as a song, an Irish song. It's this take up your quarrel with the foe. This is not an anti-war song or a poem, right? This is actually pro-war. This is simply saying it's acknowledging that their loss and where I would come from, particularly World War One, right? I mean, World War One, everything about it is awful. Everything about that war is colonial and wrong. The Canadian military went into Quebec City to round up French Canadians who refused to fight, to send them out to the trenches where they would come out. So really, um, you know, the line we say, "We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields." If he then said at that point, why are we fighting for this beat up mud and land? It would be a very fair, but take up your quarrel with the foe. So it actually is a call to arms, much like La Marseillaise, the French national anthem. So it's actually a very, very militaristic poem. So as I say, it's always read. It's become a tradition in this country. I wear a poppy proudly. Lots of, my this one, my grandfather's pipe. He was a captain in the Canadian Forces. Went up and fought in the Netherlands. You know, it's not that I don't want to say thank you for that. It's the fact that that poem is not telling us. Is that right, Melissa? Stafford, okay, thank you. So that's where we, I think, it's an interesting short poem. It's literally called In Flanders Field, Colonel John McCrae. I have a photo of the monument to him in amongst all these cemeteries. I did one time, I was at Passchendaele. I was when we were living in France, actually. Can I, oh, is it broken? That's all right. I will put it up again. Can I tell you one story? And I have many, well, as many of you know, I lived in the UK. I have many, many British friends. I just want to tell you one story, just that it wears a bit poorly on some of my British friends. But we were living in Paris and rented a car and went up to go see the Remembrance Day ceremonies. around Passchendaele and Vimy and all those things. Of course, um, very important Canadian history. But I'd rented a car, and it was a French car. Obviously, I was living in France, and I was driving up and pulled into the parking lot of this cemetery, and I'm pretty sure it was the Passchendaele Cemetery, which is just horrendous and awful. And actually, Finn's mom has relatives buried there, and they are from an Indigenous Australian background. So that's a whole conversation unto itself. So I was out back, and the Vimy Memorial, Robert, I've taken many Canadians to actually over the years, but Finn was in a car seat; he was so small. So I was out getting him out of the car seat, and a fellow came by, and I was clearly by his accent British, and he saw the license plate. Says, "Oh, français." So I didn't speak English at first, and I said, "Pas vraiment," not really. He obviously didn't speak French, and he said, "Oh, isn't that where the Nazis like to take their holidays?" Um, and then I said in a nice, crisp, clear Canadian voice, "Actually, we're here to visit relatives who lost their lives fighting for your country." So, and again, that just so often to me replays, the position that it's I want to be on everyone's side, right? And war is awful and wrong and so forth. So, you know, broad conversations. But we are going to. Sorry, I'm getting some. We're going to change tact, and we're going to get onto a heavier subject here. So I read you, and I see people have joined in later. I'm sorry you've missed because we read a really very extremely positive Canadian poem. But I'm going to read a poem to you now that I only encountered recently. It was written in 2014 by Sandra Sutter and Jim Peace. And of course, I encountered this, and you can find it online from the New Blood performance, the people that I was with in Winnipeg recently. The gentleman on Friday afternoon who will be drumming with me is part of that performance, or he'll be drumming. I won't be drumming with him. I'm going to let you have the view rather than staring at me while I read this. And of course, we've had some very positive poems about, of course, Canada and the history, but this is based on someone's personal experience. And of course, this country is going through a long and extremely painful process of reconciliation. And keep in mind, World Poetry Day, a huge part of the motivation of this day is encouraging minority voices, small linguistic groups, because poetry doesn't translate particularly well. This one's written in English, but it's important. So it's called The Indian in the Child. And this is how, this is this poem. So please listen to the words and take in what you want. If you're unfamiliar with some of this history, this country had really before Confederation, 1867, but it was really the 1887 Indian Act that brought about the system of residential schools to civilize the indigenous population. And this is, of course, someone's very true personal poem about this, and it goes like this. 6 years old on his first day of school, and emotions are running high. Mom and Dad are left home alone, as he bids his parents goodbye. The shiny white building in a faraway place holds promise and a yet unknown fear. The footsteps this young boy will take on his own should have been taken with family near. The weather here is changing, and dark clouds are closing in. The boy can't withstand them for long. They remind him his skin is sin. They are sinister like the weather and like a storm that brews within. They wash away childlike innocence, trying to kill the Indian in him. They tried to kill the Indian in the child. They thought he was a savage, untamable and wild. They could not see the Creator's plan for him was the same for you and me. We are meant to walk together on the good red road in beauty. Kill the Indian in the child, they said, and be sure those teachers tried. No language, no family, no culture. Every night he cried. A forced haircut and a cruel bath, bleaching brown skin into white. Though they tried to kill the Indian survived. Their methods were born of ignorance. Along the way, the road got twisted. The boy could not do a single thing right, no matter how hard he listened. The lessons that he learned were not about writing, literature, or math. What will it take before graduation for him to discover a welcoming path? They tried to kill the Indian. kill the Indian and the child. They thought he was a savage, untamable, and wild. They could not see the Creator's plan for him was the same for you and me. We are meant to walk together on the good red road of beauty. Oh, Canada, you failed your people. Where did you go wrong? Underneath that national anthem, you are not true, free, or strong. You built a railroad to unite this nation and sent your beautiful children to jail. They were beaten, starved, and tortured, and their future was derailed. You get 9 years for rape and drug deals, 9 years for a major crime, or 9 years in residential school to kill the Indian and the child. Generations have been affected and had to remember how to pray, to rediscover a sacred culture, and find forgiveness along the way. For years, he spent nights searching for a love he couldn't find in the walls within his prison, in the eyes that had gone blind. As he found a path to forgiveness, he could leave the pain behind. The grace he knew would save him was in his heart and not his mind. Once punished for sins like laughing, jailed in chicken coops by powers that were, we are walking again on the good red road and creating a new future. We thank that Creator for giving us life and reminding us every day that the enemy who destroyed us once is now the friend with whom we pray. The Indian in that child is the chief of his people today. He is leading his community, showing them grace along the way. They walk towards a new future in this country we all share, so that his 6-year-old grandchild will have no reason to be scared. They tried to kill the Indian. They cried. They thought he was a savage, untamable, and wild. They could not see the Creator's plan for him was the same for you and me. We are meant to walk together on the good red road in beauty. So that is a poem that I obviously just learned very recently. Um, yeah, and I mean, how does one? Yeah, and that is, I met the person who the play is about. I had an honor of meeting him. What? Well, I mean, it's brave. Oh, Canada, you failed your people. Where did you go wrong? You are not true, free, or strong. It's extremely impressive. The thing that I always come away with every time I am engaged with indigeneity in this country is how to rediscover a sacred culture and find forgiveness along the way. It is just so spectacular, and I have so much to learn from this deep sense of forgiveness and the deep sense of sharing and self-sacrifice that seems to be certainly consistent in Indigenous populations here, at least in the west of what is now Turtle Island, or the west of Turtle Island, what is now Canada. I think that's you know uh, it's so you can find it. I don't know if someone put the link up, but it's the True Blood website, and you can see the poem, right? So I just printed it out because I don't have it memorized. The young lady who performs it at the moment, they were just in Saskatoon actually performing it, and I'm trying to organize to take these people to Ottawa next year. So I would love to do that. Um, so we still have enough time. So maybe we'll go back to a tried and true favorite here, which is just a bit gentler, but has a lot to do with the climate I live in here. Um, sure, Mary Lou. Yep. So the first poem that I read was "Define Canada." I'm sure, Mary Lou, you know it. And the reason you know it, it was that Koizan, Shane Koizan read it at the Olympics. And it's a very rah-rah poem. And then I read in Flanders. Oh, sorry, I read The Spell of the Yukon, of course. Um, so I just thought, why don't we finish off, everyone? And of course, Finn has his cooking in an hour, and I'm going to be a spectator at that. Yeah, Shane did. If only Indigenous people had so. Well, Diane, I mean, it's sort of true, but again, I mean, it depends whom and when. Um, it would be sort of you're welcome, right? It would be much nicer if we had all just sort of had a gradual fusions of people, rather than a violent overthrow and on um, and of course, I mean, we talk about. Do you know when we talk about being decimated? Do you know that term? Of course, you all know the term. But if something is decimated, it means 1/10 is killed. Through the Americas, the general response of Indigenous people encountering Europeans was death. And in some communities, death was as high as 90% before they actually met even a foreigner with disease coming through, right? Mm, so, in the time we have left, I'm just going to read you one of the most famous Canadian poems, of course. And I was going to read a couple of French poems, but I just thought not today. I wanted to give sort of just a cross section of different views. Um, I wouldn't say I love all poetry, but anyone who likes music likes poetry, right? And I'm such a folk music kind of guy that it plays a big role in my life. But I still have to go back to these classic ones. So here, well, let's go back to looking at Mel Bourgeot in the distance, and you get a sense here. I'll even zoom in because I'll just leave this here. Isn't that gorgeous? Where thanks, Polly. Um, oh yes, Diane. Yep, yep. Well, it's so often Indigenous people here and like on the West Coast, which are trying to keep biodiversity. So there's Mel Bourgeot up there. Thanks, Lynn. All right, so I won't be looking at your chat here, but this is, of course, just a classic poem, and I've read it so many times in my life, I enjoy it. But it is, of course, indeed called The Cremation of Sam McGee. For those of you who are new with this, it's once again Robert Service, the Bard of the Yukon, and just one of these great famous poems. I remember Johnny Cash even did a version of it, but it goes like this. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake Lebarge I cremated Sam McGee. Now, Sam McGee was from Tennessee, where the cotton blooms and blows. Why he left his home in the south to roam around the pole, God only knows. He was always cold, but the land of gold seemed to hold him like a spell. Though he'd often say in his homely way that he'd sooner live in hell. On a Christmas day, we were mushing our way over the Dawson Trail. Talk of your cold through the parka's fold, it stabbed like a driven nail. If our eyes we'd closed and the lashes froze till sometimes we couldn't see, it wasn't much fun, but the only one to whimper was Sam McGee. And that very night, as we lay packed tight in our robes beneath the snow, and the dogs were fed and the stars overhead were dancing heel and toe, he turned to me, and Cap, says he, I'll cash in this trip, I guess. And if I do, I'm asking that you won't refuse my last request. Well, he seemed so low that I couldn't say no. Then he says with a sort of moan, it's the cursed cold, and it's got right hold till I'm chilled clean through to the bone. Yet tain't been dead. It's my awful dread of the icy grave that pains. So I want you to swear that foul or fair you'll cremate my last remains. Well, a pal's last need is a thing to heed, and I swore I would not fail. As we started on at the streak of dawn, but God, he looked ghastly pale. He crouched on the sleigh and he raved all day of his home in Tennessee, and before nightfall a corpse was all that was left of Sam McGee. There wasn't a breath in that land of death, and I hurried, horror driven, with a corpse half hid that I couldn't get rid because of a promise given. It was lashed to the sleigh, and it seemed to say, you may tax your brawn and brains, but you promised true, and it's up to you to cremate these last remains. Now, a promise made is a debt unpaid, and the trail has its own stern code. In the days to come, though my lips were dumb, in my heart how I cursed that load. In the long, long night, by the lone firelight, while the huskies round in a ring howled out their woes to the homeless snows, oh God, how I loathed that thing. And every day, that quiet clay seemed to heavy and heavier grow. And on I went, though the dogs were spent, and the grub was getting low. The trail was bad, and I felt half mad, but I swore I would not give in, and I'd often sing to the hateful thing, and it hearkened with a grin, till I came to the marge of Lake Lebarge, and a derelict there lay. It was jammed in the ice, but I saw it twice. It was called the Alice May. I looked at it, and I thought a bit, and I looked at my frozen chum, then here, said I, with a sudden cry, is my crematorium. Some planks I tore from the cabin floor, and I lit the boil fire. Some coal I found that was lying round, and I heaped the fuel higher. The flames just soared and the furnace roared, such a blaze you seldom see, and I burrowed a hole in the glowing coal and I stuffed in Sam McGee. Then I made a hike, for I didn't like to hear him sizzle so. And the heavens scowled and the huskies howled and the wind began to blow. It was icy cold, but the hot sweat rolled down my cheeks, and I don't know why. And the greasy smoke in an inky cloak went streaking down the sky. I do not know how long in the snow I wrestled with grisly fear. But the stars came out, and they danced about, ere again I ventured near. I was sick with dread, but I bravely said, I'll just take a peep inside. I guess he's cooked. Then it's time I looked. And the door I opened wide. And there sat Sam looking cool and calm in the heart of the furnace roar. And he wore a smile you could see a mile, and he said, Please close that door. It's fine in here, but I greatly fear you'll let in the cold and storm. Since I left Plumtree down in Tennessee, 'tis the first time I've been warm. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the cremation of Sam McGee. Just a poem that anyone in this part of the world needs to know. But I'm sure you all have many, many poems. I do not know, Melissa, who the current poet laureate is. I do not. Thank you. It's a good point. I'm sure very easy. You're very welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. Obviously, it's not Jen. As a historian, I'll tell you a poem I wrote a little while ago. It's a very short one. It goes like this: It is a mystery to me why history to them is never like the news I see when I watch CNN. a bit to unpack from that. Well, thank you, Cynthia. I would, these are sort of things that I would love. I would love to plan more of these sort of talks. But just thank you, Ruth. Sorry, I saw a lot of the blue things, Diane. A lot of the blue. I don't know what tabs they are for you. A tip box coming through. Title of the CH, the poem, the title of the poem. Sorry, it's from New Blood. And here I'll show you so you can see the Indian in the Child. So that is that poem right there. Yeah, it was fun. I actually, so thanks, Deborah. Thanks, Jane. I had to cancel my morning tour, of course, because my car is now acting up all over again. So I have a loaner car, but the phone rang, and I know I have a voicemail when I was just starting off, so a message from them, probably telling me what's going on. Thank you. You're very welcome. No, it's fun to do that. Oh, thanks, Melissa, for putting that in. Yeah, so this is way too much Earth to be seen back out here in March. I know for all of you, thank you, Lynn, around the world, this is spring, but for us, it tends to, we tend to not think of spring until May. So winter will come back, but this is actually not even, yeah, Diane, well, it'd be fun. I'm more than happy maybe to put up another poetry reading day all together. So I expect everyone will be there in about an hour. Yeah, Diane, no kidding. Well, that's actually true to some extent. Well, we're in an El Nino year as well, Deborah. A seasonal poetry. Yeah. I think it's a really fun thing to do. This is one time it would be really fun to share with everyone and have, you be able to read a poem, but obviously it's not a two-way conversation. So, but there we are. So, by the way, I told my neighbors up there because they were all playing on the deck. I said, sorry, I'm not calling out to you. Yeah. Ben's good. Well, thank you very much. So listen, thanks everyone. I want to say peace and love, and always try, as always, to cover a lot of different subjects here. So my grandfather's pipe, which will now go sit back up on the mantle because I just cannot stand the taste of tobacco at all. But I mean, you got to keep your granddad's pipe, right? And so for those of us who have been writers our whole lives, it's fun to celebrate. So yeah, it's nice to have. Yeah, I've got another. Do you know, Sairi, from my other granddad, my Irish one, I actually have a silver-plated cigarette case that was given to him as a gift by the government of Thailand because he used to go up there with work. It's engraved with his name on it, which is really cool. So all this tobacco stuff, and I'm just so anti-tobacco. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I'll let you go. Kid's going to start getting ready for his cooking, and I will see you later. All right. Lots of love, everyone. Thank you so much for your friendship and for having a little bit of poetry together. So there we go. Enjoy the rest of your day, evening, morning, wherever you are in the world. And yet, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.